Welcome to 0 to LFI in 60 minutes in an MCP server. TLDR, we're breaking new technology with old, really old tricks. And because, there will actually be an explanation for why this happens all the time later on in the talk, so stay tuned. Anyway, get my prisoner view up here. And so, who am I? My name is Kurt Boberg. Hello, nice to meet all of you, kinda, sorta. This is kind of asymmetric, but yes, hello. I will not remember any of your names. I'm very sorry about that. I also kind of have face blindness. But I'm a staff security researcher at SemGrep. What does that mean? I pretty much just break computers as my day job, and for some reason people pay me for it, which is actually pretty awesome. And more specifically, I kind of understand computers. A lot of what I do is read documentation. Actually, at my first job, I was actually supposed to build and deploy software. I was formerly DevOps. And my DevOps manager got really tired of my nonsense because I spent a lot of time reading documentations and figuring out how PowerShell worked and less time actually building code to deploy other code. And he got sick of me, and then the director of AppSec at that company was like, hey, you know a lot about production. My team doesn't know anything about production. Would you like to come work for us? And I was like, yes. And that's how I got into AppSec. So yeah, basically, I like understanding why software was built. Lots of people are like, I love software. Computers are the best. Computers are actually the worst. But software is built to solve human problems. So outcomes and actionability are really important to me. And so we're actually gonna talk a little bit about the agenda. Cool, there's a little bit of display lag over here, so I'm sorry about that. Anyway, so we're gonna start with, what is the Model Context Protocol? A super quick primer to make sure we're all on the same page. Show of hands, how many people are familiar with the Model Context Protocol, or MCP? Cool, I see lots of hands. Unrelated question, how many of you are left-handed? Not as many as I expected. Interesting. Anyway, next we'll talk about a bug I found in an MCP server in a hilariously short amount of time. We're gonna do a live-ish audit of an open source MCP server that at least as of earlier this week had the same code. We're gonna talk about how defense in depth actually works, and you should do it and stuff, even if it's not fun. And then I'm gonna give you some takeaways, and hopefully I will pace correctly and I can answer some questions. That last part I'm kind of bad at, and my timekeeper right here in the front will keep me honest. I'll do my best. Anyway, let's go. So, what is MCP? It is a standard for LLM communication with external tools and data sources. MCP servers may be local or remote. Usually, the very first one is operating over standard I/O. I don't care about that, so we're not going to talk about it. Because if you're already on the device, you've already won. I'm an AppSec person. I am very much not interested in building exploit chains or anything like that. I am ye old, oh, I popped calculator, I won, on to the next problem, because I don't care anymore. Because I have proven that you can do the bad. And I can show that to an engineer, and they'll go fix it, because they understand that I have done the bad, and my job is done. This also makes it so I can go much faster than attackers, because all I have to do is find the problem. I don't have to make the problem an actual problem for the business, which is a thing, if you're a defender, you should also take away from this talk, because it's way easier to get engineers to fix stuff if you just go, oh, look, I popped calculator. Do you understand why that's bad? Great, go fix it. While an attacker who gets into the infrastructure or whatever has to then go build an exploit chain to do whatever it is they want to do. Also, remote services are bound by the laws of networking, right? If it's a remote service, it has to talk over something to go talk to the service, right? There's no magic telepathy for LLMs to talk to MCP. It has to talk over something we already know about. So the specification, I'm going to, the slides will be available. There's a QR code at the end of the talk. You want the slides, there will be links and stuff in the slides, yada, yada, yada. I'm just going to very kind of gloss over the specification. MCP is based on the LSP language server protocol, which is a very old technology for things like how IntelliSense works in Visual Studio. It's just an LSP talking to .NET. The end. So that's kind of what it's informed by. So if you're familiar with LSP and stuff, that should feel pretty familiar to you. It's client server. The two things in the spec, explicitly in the spec, are standard I/O and HTTP. The spec does not prevent you from doing any transport you want. You can do gRPC over whatever. You can do WebSockets. It doesn't have any prescriptions against doing that. It just doesn't have any like reference implementations or specifications for how you're supposed to do that. Finally, the way that it transmits data is JSON RPC because of course it is. So look, it's the shiny new technology, Model Context Protocol. Ooh, it's so new and spicy. What could it possibly be? LOL, it's JSON RPC over an API. Ha ha ha. Is this new? No. JSON RPC 2.0 is from 2010. JSON RPC 1.0 is from 2006. How many of you were still in grade school in 2006? Yeah, not new. We know how to deal with this already. Oh, I think I might have accidentally, oh, right, sorry, we're going back. I have talked about the specification again. Anyway, we're gonna talk about resources. Resources are exactly what they sound like. Documents, source code, images, build artifacts, anything that you might want to hand to an LLM as context. This is what like RAG talks to, retrieval augmented generation under the hood, if you have an MCP server that gives you RAG. The next thing is prompt. This one I really don't understand. If you like have any idea why MCP servers do this, please help me understand because it's weird. Like all it is you can ask an MCP server for a prompt to give to your LLM client. It's just a string. It's like, here's some context engineering I did for you. Cool, I guess. Anyway, it's not very interesting, but it's in the spec. I think it's basically just context engineering for your packaging for consumers because they can't be bothered to Google context engineering and read like the first 5 results. I don't know, make it make sense. This is the interesting one, mostly what we're gonna talk about, tools. Tools are where things get really interesting. Tools allow an LLM to do something other than read a file or make text, right? Because the first version of ChatGPT or Claude or whatever was really just, hi, I'm a web browser. You can put text into me and I send you responses. That's all I do. Woo, I'm so neat, but I kind of look like a human. Woo, but I can't actually like do anything, like invoke shell or whatever. Tools are how you do things like go call who am I, go call curl, go do something in Office or SharePoint or whatever. Go execute arbitrary shell instructions, which is kind of why we as hackers are very interested in this part of the spec, because this is how I make the computer do what I want instead of what you want. And finally, there's sampling. Sampling is not widely supported yet, but it is like this bizarro Uno reverse thing where the server can ask your LLM client for a chat completion and then get the response. And there are some caveats around how that is supposed to be managed by a human. And the spec says you have to, but I suspect that there are gonna be people who then don't do that part, and that gets bad for just use your imagination, and there will be future talks on that at some point. But I'm just gonna say, sampling, it's there, it's in the spec, it's interesting, we'll talk about it later. So, tooling support for MCP is all real good. Building a server for MCP in Python is real easy. You pip install MCP. And then, okay, cool, I have a library, but it's hard to use, right? Wrong. This is what making an MCP server looks like in Python. That's it. You write a function, you go add mcp.tool, and then you serve an MCP server, and it just works You slap it on a WSGI server, you put it on the internet, and then people start poking at it, and that's where you run into problems. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the technology lifecycle. This is going to be an evergreen lifecycle explanation of all new technologies ever. And I see some familiar faces in the audience who have probably seen this exact diagram before from a shared coworker of ours, John Heisman. You can take this at the end of the slides. There will be a filled in version in the attendee versions of the slides. You can take it with you and beat engineers over the head with it because it'll be really funny. And also it's evergreen. It works all the time for everything ever. Yeah. In the beginning, a new technology is invented. Woo! We invented MCP or LLMs or YAML or JSON or pick your poison. We forget everything we've ever learned about bugs. We recycle every old bug class, every single one, in a new hat. We re-implement the same defenses, and then a new technology is invented. We forget everything we've learned about bugs, and so on and so forth. The very first version of this was drawn on a whiteboard for me a little over 10 years ago at DocuSign, and it was originally for YAML. And I'm sure there was a version of it done for JSON, and there was a version of it done for .NET. And anyway, you get where I'm going. This is the author in question, John Heisman. He's currently the CISO of Proof, and he works with a bunch of other former Microsoft people. He's been in the game a very long time. He did things like remote routes in Microsoft Exchange. So like I send you an email and own your Exchange server. Very smart guy. This is where that came from. It works everywhere forever. You can basically just go, hey, engineer, tell me about that new thing you're playing with. And then you can just apply this model to it and find new bugs that are actually old bugs. And then you can just fix them the same way we fixed that same bug the last 1,000 times. This is also how I got my first CVE. You can go look that one up. It's RCE via deserialization in YAML.net, which I found because the engineers were like, hey, we want to use YAML for something. And I'm like, I'm going to go audit the one .NET parser that works, and yeah, I got a CV for it. So at this point, some of you are being like, I was promised hacks. Where are the hacks? And so here's how I broke SemGrep's hosted MCP service in 30 minutes. So in the beginning, we're gonna set the stage. Technically, this would have worked way better on Friday, but here it is, it's Saturday, but pretend it's Friday. It's Friday! I don't know about you all, but Friday is generally not the day to start big projects, especially Friday afternoon. You don't drop big bugs on engineering. All you will do is make them mad, and it won't really get cycles until Monday anyway. So as a security person, you're kind of just waiting around for like the, I don't know, the person who's constantly trying to drop struts on you at 4 p.m. on a Friday on your .NET stack. This is totally not a real example from my own experience. Or in general, start anything you can't finish in a couple hours, right? Friday afternoon is for chilling and checking in with your stakeholders and generally having a nice time and hopefully leaving a little bit early. Hey, MCP hype has been all over LinkedIn the past couple days. Hey, wait a minute. We have an MCP server. I should go look at that. So I reach out to my buddy Lewis and I send him this Slack message, which if you can't read it, you still remember any CLI command injection vectors? I'm trying to get the MCP server to do something illegal. And then a minute later, I was like, I looked through our SemGrep backlog and it says no. I am very sad because I was hoping to have a hilariously fast 5-minute route in MCP. Sadly, no, we actually dog food our own software, and it turns out that it's actually pretty secure. Very good for customers, very boring for me as a security researcher. No free after lunch dopamine for me anyway. So AppSec people, what do we do first? We immediately read the code, right? It's literally just a repo. Hit it with your eyeballs, right? If you have code literacy, that's really important, right? Seeing how stuff is made makes me understand it more completely. I like white box testing a lot. I like to get a sense of the code base and who wrote it. What design patterns do they prefer? How is business logic organized? What might have led to their architectural or design decisions? Because software is still a reflection of the human who wrote it, at least for now. Claude and Codex and Copilot are gonna mess this up a little bit in the future, but for now it still works. White box testing is also a great thing to pair with static analysis for just trying to exploit findings, because it's like a cheat code. If it doesn't work through the call chain until you understand why it doesn't. Now you know something about the security properties of your application, right? Because if you try something and it doesn't work, it might not be secure, but there is something in there in the kill chain that is preventing you from doing bad. And we like that, technically. We are sad, but we are happy for our employer. And you are also calibrated to the sort of stuff that will help you prioritize future findings of that type, right? If you're like, this should totally work, and then it doesn't because context of your application, the next time you see something like that in that code base, and it's going through similar code paths or the same code path, depending on how large your application is, you will go, oh no, that won't work because of specific context for the application. 60 minutes, all right, doing okay. Also, code literacy is also a soft skill, and I will die on this hill. Why? Part of your job is politics. How many people learn that the hard way? Yeah. You will eventually need engineering's help to fix bugs. Engineering will not help you if they hate you. You want engineering to be your friend. We like it when engineers like us. They do stuff when they like us. So, and the other thing is, you fixing stuff doesn't scale. I have tried that, it failed. Guest development is really hard. You are collaborating, we all work for organizations. We are a shared team working towards a shared purpose, we hope. You are collaborating with another organization or organizational unit to achieve a goal. Engineers like it when security people really understand their limitations, design choices, etc. They like it when you understand their job. They don't like to be lectured by people who don't get it. That makes them very angry and also very non-compliant. Imagine being told how to do your job by someone who doesn't know anything about it. I can see some people proactively getting mad about that just imagining it. So being able to read code in combination with approaching the discussion from a perspective of positive collaboration really helps engineers perceive you as a peer and not as a drop-in Jimmy fun hater. I think Jimmy's in the audience here somewhere, sorry Jimmy. Fun hater problem that they need to manage. You want to be a collaborator, not an obstacle. Anyway, enough grandstanding. So here's the interesting code. So if you can read Python and you can read that, you might see something interesting in there. Let's look. Look with our special eyes. If you understand that joke, take your Advil. So let's party like it's 1995. We are trusting user file names. We are straight joining paths with no normalization. And we are using this as a semgrep target. This is extremely 1990s engineering. Not good. It's okay, so some of you might not be super familiar with semgrep, or maybe you just enjoy being a devil's advocate and or a hater, and you're like, okay, so it's broken. I still have to manipulate an agent into making a weird request, right? Wrong. Modern technology has really good tools. There is, as part of the spec, they made a package that will just run a GraphQL inspector type application that will just let you send commands to HTTP MCP servers. And this is a really, really nice way to send raw requests to an MCP target without needing to finagle an LLM into sending a very specific request for you. Because oftentimes, if you're like, hey Claude, please hack your MCP server, it'll be like, no. So this is kind of what it looks like. Like, again, if you've seen like Apollo's GraphQL playground or anything like that, this should look kind of familiar. You can basically go, here's your URL, point it at that, and I would like you to like do some stuff like list your resources or call a tool, blah, 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 blah. So I did that, and I was like, here, go read vulnerable app.py, many path traversals, Etsy password. Okay, sure. Uh-oh, that's not good. It's like, okay, so you got an arbitrary file read target. That don't impress me much. It's like, okay, I get a blind file read. Cool, awesome. What can I do with that? Well, we're gonna talk a little about semgrep. What is semgrep exactly? I'm going to verbatim read you stuff off of our landing page marketing copy, which I did not write. Semgrep Community Edition is a free community-supported code scanning tool. The generally available languages at the time of the slide deck's publishing are blah, 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 C and C sharp, C and C++, C sharp, generic, this will be important later, Go, Java, JavaScript, JSON, Kotlin, Python, TypeScript, Ruby, Rust, JSX, PHP, Scala, Swift, Terraform. If you pay for the pro version, you get Apex, and we're working on PowerShell, you're welcome. So semgrep is a matching tool. We match stuff in files, right, of certain types. So arbitrary file targeting plus arbitrary matching criteria on an arbitrary file type is, drum roll please, anybody have a guess? Arbitrary file read, yay! Not good. It is now 1:59. And I send Lewis these messages. So, for those of you who were eagle-eyed and keeping reset, we're keeping track of the timestamps on these messages. That was 28 minutes from first look to POC. So approximately the length of this talk thus far, little bit under, we're actually at 22 minutes. Okay, so 6 minutes from now, I find this bug. So I send this message, which is, again, what you're not actually supposed to do. But happy Friday! TLDR, arbitrary file read on our hosted MCP server. I don't have a full exploit yet because, again, I'm a defender. I don't build full exploits because we don't do that here. We just go, yep, you can do it. Please go fix it. And so basically you can go, provide a malicious custom rule that matches the file to a meta variable, provide an app token so the finding gets reported to semgrep cloud, and then you can go pull the contents of any file on the disk out via the app. Profit. We're done, yay. Also, that's a spec violation, LOLs, and we'll talk about that. Right now, actually, speaking of spec violations, Nuance will get you if you're not careful. This is the Grafana MCP server. It kind of famously made waves because it like had no authorization on top of it a while back. I think it still doesn't if you deploy it in certain configurations. To be very clear, I am not picking on Grafana. They just have a really good illustration of why details matter. And lots of people will mess this up in a lot of ways, a lot of times. To the README. So it does have some RBAC permissions, like Grafana, like if you're familiar with Grafana, log aggregator, blah, 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 lets you read logs from your services. They do have, like, Grafana, the tool, has a bunch of RBAC permissions, and those are needed to function properly. The MCP server has a crap ton of tools. Grafana's official stance on how to set up this MCP server to work is just give it an editor role for the service account and stick it on your MCP server. So like, yeah, just like give it a huge read write to everything credential and turn on the things you want. Yeah, how many people are kind of upset about that right now? Yeah, you should all be upset about this. Anyone who's like, yes, I would like a programmatic editor role to all of my logs, maybe not the greatest idea. People put the wildest crap in logs. Like I have found user session tokens and like encryption keys and all kinds of nonsense in logs. You do not want attackers nosing around in your logs, especially pre-auth, which is what this lets you do. because MCP also has sort of an OAuth or no-auth authorization model. And if you've ever met engineers, they do not like implementing OAuth. So if you give them an option to not do OAuth, they will take it, especially if it's an internal tool. And no one will touch this ever. It's fine. Yes, it is not fine. All right, enhance. Yeah, one service account. Anything you want Grafana the Grafana MCP to do has to have credentials for everything. And the suggestion is, yeah, that's fine. Just give it an editor role. So, do we support HTTP transport? SSE, streamable HTTP. We sure do. If you fire this thing up in your infrastructure, there will be an HTTP endpoint sitting there listening that you can go point MCP inspector at and like just go call Grafana tools with credentials that live on that box, not that you necessarily provide yourself. And yeah, so how does the MCP server get these credentials exactly? From the environment. It's just like on the box that the MCP server is running on. So like it's classic confused deputy. Like you just send it a, hey, MCP server, I'm gonna ask you real nice to like go read all the logs for the auth service and please send them all back to me. Okay, thanks, bye. And it's like, okie dokie, here you go. I don't know who you are, but that's fine. Or I guess you can read them from headers from the request. Why is your LLM client sending custom headers to your MCP server? Because that's like super illegal from the spec. Right there. MCP servers must not, in big letters, accept or transit any other tokens. Big no-no, not allowed. Don't do that. No. So, spec violations being what they are, this is not the worst thing, right? It does result in poor handling of user credentials because if you're doing the HTTP header auth, like, what is you doing? And like, in normal operation, you're giving your Grafana credentials to an LLM that's probably not locally hosted. Maybe not, because like that's like automatically credential leaking to a third-party vendor. Like you will probably cause an incident if you use this with like an Anthropic LLM. However, if I saw an HTTP transport Grafana MCP server in my red team travels, I'd probably just go, MCP inspector, I'm gonna throw commands at it and see what it does. Might just have a service account with wide access to the company Grafana instance, and we all know logs are worth their weight in gold to an attacker. So MCP is kind of still the Wild West. Like this talk was originally written a while ago, and unfortunately this is still true. But there is good news. Container hardening saves the day. This is a literal quote from me talking to our CTO, and I was like, defense in depth is preventing me from doing worse. This is me lamenting the inability to get a shell on the container. Why is that? Our CTO is paranoid AF. He built this whole thing for untrusted code, or why that underappreciated container hardening project you're working on is actually super important. So if you're an intern and you get handed a container hardening project, it's actually really, really important. And if you do a good job, people will appreciate you and remember you. I still remember the intern that worked on our golden image project, and I see him at DEF CON every now and then. And he has been very successful because he put his whole heart and soul into that, and he did a great job. So the MCP server ran in an isolated container workload in EKS. It was provisioned with an app user, not a root user. People skip this step all the time. It makes me sad. The app user had no real permissions outside of the app directory, and the public open source code was receiving much more development attention and was much more secure. The other quote from the CTO when I was like, hey, Drew, you did an oops and I owned your stuff. He was like, I'm just hyper paranoid, so I always use AWS to isolate workloads. Which is a really good attitude to have, actually. All right, so let's talk a little bit about takeaways. What if I told you that MCP bugs are exactly the same as the old bugs? There's a little bit of new context to learn, little bit, but you can largely use your existing skill set. If you're an API hacker, go nuts. MCP is shooting fish in a barrel. Yeah, under the hood, they're just JSON RPC HTTP APIs. We already have a pretty good mental model of how to think about these as building blocks for exploit chains. Use that to your advantage. Remote servers, in particular, are interesting because their callers are not humans, nor are they deterministic. So either the human has to authenticate on their behalf, such as with OAuth, or you need to pass credentials through against the specification, or the MCP server just has a credential it uses, and anyone who asks it for something is considered authorized. Big yikes. And that happens more often than you would think. And people cannot help giving these damn things client access. Like, it's sad, actually. The command line is, and we'll reset. Part of the reason this happens is the command line is the universal glue for making functionality fast. The whole LLM space is moving at breakneck speed, right? Like, how many people have heard of OpenClaw, Moltbot, et cetera, yada, yada, yada? How many people had heard of OpenClaw like 3 weeks ago? 4 weeks ago? Yeah, right? Like, everyone knows about it now. A month ago, maybe 10% of you. It's going super crazy fast these days. Staying competitive often means getting things done yesterday. Shortcuts will be taken. Mistakes will be made. Look for those mistakes. And it'll happen to you. SemGrep is a security company. We build a static analysis tool that looks for problems like this, that is reliably deployed across almost every project, except for the CTO gets a bee in his bonnet and goes and home rolls something and then forgets to wire it up to CI and ships it and puts it on the internet, and suddenly, oops, it'll happen. Not being perfect is okay. Mistakes are opportunities for learning. We're putting AI in it everywhere, forever. How many people work for a company that is putting AI in it? Yeah, right? If you distribute software or have software involved in your business, somebody is working on an MCP thing somewhere. If you're like, no, they're not, you just haven't found it yet. And finally, Cursor, Windsurf, Copilot, Claude Code, et cetera, et cetera. Any team at your company can now author these things. The barrier to building one of these things is 0. And they can put them on the internet because Windsurf, Cursor, Claude, Codex, et cetera, will write them deployment scripts to put it on the internet. Claude can write you Terraform plans, maybe not entirely correctly, and almost certainly not on the first try, but it'll do it eventually. Basics matter. If you can hear this picture, I like you. Container hardening is awesome. Instead of having to be clever and insightful and borderline clairvoyant one time, you have to do it many times to actually do anything meaningful. As defenders, we like this because every time we make attackers do more work, we give them an opportunity to make a mistake. And that is how we catch them, because every time they make a mistake, they light up the logs like a Christmas tree. You want to give them as many things to trip over as possible. When you find cool stuff, teach people. Like, this seems like dumb and obvious, but people forget to do it all the time. Every time I find nonsense like this at SemGrep or anywhere else, we have like a weekly demo day where people share stuff they're excited about. You know what I do when I show up to these? I'm like, hey, you guys want to hear about how I like totally broke the app this week? And then I tell everyone from other researchers to engineers to the finance people and the people team hey, look at this like terrible thing I found in software, and here's how we should probably fix it. Because of this sort of culture of knowledge sharing, I literally have friends in our sales org who own Flipper Zeros and know how to use them. Like, this is awesome. We're just like, you will just make new hackers doing this. Like, you should just do it. It's basically free. Teaching security-minded folks and junior researchers how to bug hunt and how to compassionately communicate findings is like magical. Imagine if every engineer in your org was as good as a first-year college AppSec hire. How many folks here like work on like AppSec or like ProdSec teams? How many of you are a ratio better than 1 to 200? I don't see any hands, right? Think about that scale. Like, and think about how big your team is versus how many engineers there are. I was the lone AppSec person for an engineering org of, I think, 1,500 people. I got real good at teaching EMs how to look at logs from the perspective of the security engineer. I had a lot less work to do after that. It was great. If you have the privilege of hiring junior researchers, dangle like juicy threads in front of them and then just lead them to the finding. This is how I learned to do what I do. My mentor would basically go, hey, like this API service is interesting. That's it, go find it. It's in there, I promise. Because that sort of bug hunting is like catnip to curious people, especially if they know there's an answer that's in there. Like because he would do that. He would just go, yeah, I know there's a bug in there. Like I am sure of it. I know exactly where it is. I'm not gonna tell you where it is or even where to start other than like it's in this service. Have fun, you have 4 hours, go. That's how I learned. I got thrown into the deep end of the pool. That may not work for everyone, but it worked for me because I had a good manager who could like look at how I approach the world and be like, yeah, that'll probably work on him. It did, here I am. Be nice to your engineers. Like, please, like if you take one thing away, don't be a jerk. Your engineers did not write bad code and they are not stupid. They made a mistake, tops. You are a team. You are all working together. Teams do not criticize mistakes. They work to make sure the team learns and grows from them. Engineering has already figured this out. Blameless retrospectives are kind of how we do engineering now. And engineers who work for teams that don't do that are like, I hate my job and I want to leave. Like, this is a solved problem. We shouldn't be redoing it, and yet security is just so impulsively the Department of No that you have to like beat on it and just be like, and you were wrong and you did bad. No. We made a mistake. We're learning from it. We're preventing it in the future. And let's see, we're at 38 minutes, so I'm actually got a little bit more time than I expected for Q&A. I am happy to answer questions about MCP or AppSec or anything else. Burning questions, go. Yes. Okay, so if I'm hearing the question correctly, it's how do I communicate to engineers that I'm curious about their line of work? Is that a correct statement? Okay, so this will be different for everyone, I think. The important thing is to approach it with authenticity, like be genuinely curious about their work. As I think someone, was it the keynote? I have had so many conversations and my brain is so cooked from being at Bsides for 2 straight days that I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard it somewhere in the past 48 hours. Someone said it takes 9 months to build a relationship. Like, that is absolute facts. Like, when you land at a new job as a security person, you should go meet all of the EMs. That's engineering managers for the students in the room. I'm very sorry. We love acronyms here in corporate America. And if you don't know what one of the things that came out of my mouth was, please like yell at me and be like, I don't know what those 5 letters mean. Please explain it to me because I forget. Talk to engineering managers and like figure out what they build and how underwater their team is, because they think about that all the time, I guarantee you. So understanding what they build and what their load is like is the kind of first place to start, because if that team builds like a business critical service and they are deeply underwater, you need to be very compassionate with that team, because they are all, at the very least, feeling like they are staring down getting fired every day. And you don't want to pile on top of that, because again, we want engineers to be our friends. Engineers are friends, not food. For me personally, I have a very mathematics heavy background. A lot of the way that I approach the world is very first principles and architecture based. I am not a software engineer by trade at all. I have sort of absorbed a lot of that stuff from reading documentation and specs, and I do dumb stuff like check out books from the library like highperformance.net. But like, that's not normal and doesn't have to be you. But the important thing is approach engineers from a place of genuine curiosity, and it really does help to understand at least how to read and write one language, so you kind of understand their job in your bones. Because people who don't get it, don't get it. And there is like instant social capital from understanding the misery of staring at a stack trace for an hour and a half going, why is this broken? That immediately gives you more credibility to engineers. And I'm not saying it's fair, but it's how it is. And you don't operate under the how it should be model, you operate under the how it is model. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great, cool. Next question. I know you have more questions. Yes. Okay, so I'm repeating the question. I think the question I heard is, given how easy these are to build, how do you communicate to the people building them that they are just adding attack surface and new ways to shoot themselves in the foot? I am a researcher at a small-ish scale-up with a whole bunch of people who, by and large, are massive AI skeptics. So I don't really have to do that right now. And I'm somewhat grateful for that, because woof. I think it's really just an extension of education and almost just developer relations you should already be doing with treat anything that you didn't write yourself with a hefty amount of skepticism, and don't put things on the internet till you're sure. And lots of people skip that second part because they're like, I just want to go do a cool thing and see it. And I get it. I get the desire to ship and see a thing that you made out in the world. But I think a lot of it is just getting engineers to stop and think about risk at all, because a lot of engineers don't. Engineers are way over-indexed on building. They really love building, and that makes them real good at their jobs. But builders need that feedback loop. They need to have a thing that they're like, I made that. That's a really important part of their dopamine loop that keeps them engaged in their work. And it's really hard to fight that. So you need to go with it. And I think what that means really, because you can't just say no, right? Like, they're gonna build stuff. But you can say, if you want to build MCP servers and all that stuff, please standard IO. That is like the easiest way for you to get something on your box that you can play around with that is minimally harmful to the rest of the organization. And that's really what our jobs are, right? We are in the business of risk minimization, not risk elimination, because that's impossible. The only risk-free computer was not built. So I think it's a complicated question, but I think just sort of doing the mile high, like having them understand the risk and understand that like it's an immature technology, and immature technologies are wildly attacker biased until we really get our feet under ourselves for the defensive posture. And also, I would really just harp on the OAuth or no auth and being like, do you really want to do OAuth? Really? You want to do OAuth? Do you think you can do it right the first time? You sure? Yeah. Anyway. Any other questions? Burning questions. Any questions? Yes?
Are there alternatives to MCP? Like, is that the problem, or is it an engineering problem?
The question was, are there alternatives to MCP? And is it like a no alternatives problem or an engineering problem? I don't actually know that the spec itself is bad or the problem, or necessarily even that building MCP servers is the problem. I think the problem is velocity. And the space is so biased towards just absolutely insane velocity, especially in the LLM space, where if you're a day behind, you're basically out of the race, that people are cutting every corner they can to stay competitive. And I get that, because in the current environment, staying competitive, especially in a market where venture capital is expensive and it's like product market fit or die, you gotta go fast. You gotta go as fast as you possibly can. And so our job is to make sure that engineers can go as fast as they possibly can, as safely as they can. And that's not necessarily saying don't. It's saying you need to think about these things because these are sort of the table stakes attacks that everyone knows about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a DevOps, developer experience type of problem based on.
Yeah, like it's a... Yeah, some of it is self-service and shadow IT and stuff like that, and that's a whole nother conversation. Like the number of times that I have had to complain about subdomain takeovers because people did the wrong order of operations from decommissioning a service is too damn high. And I am still, like, we have an internal Notion page that is literally like, step 0, pull your subdomain record. I don't care. Like, the first thing you do is you pull your service off the internet. Then you decommission it. Step 1, step 0, step 0, step 0. Pull the DNS record. Pull any internet-facing records for the thing. Then take it apart. And there's just like, and I don't know that we have a good like paved path for building MCP yet, other than like standard IO is the way. Like build a standard IO thing because you're building a tech. Because one of the things that I think really causes these sorts of problems is it's not MCP, it's a deputy that's attached to a high value service. So what you're actually looking for is a deputy attached to a high value service. If that's not the case in your org, you don't actually need to care about this all that much. Like if the MCP server is like a totally unsecured HTTP MCP thing, but like all it does is read your public facing docs, I don't care. Like that's already on the internet. We can't. All right, we're at 51. So I think so like it again. It's a risk calculation. So what I would do is like use this kind of as a triage point, I guess, and go through. You're like, okay. And again, this is really lean on the like engineering lessons of the past 60 years, because engineering has been learning this stuff constantly for 60 years. It's like, do the blameless retro. Be like, I'm not mad at you. What did you build? And then just go through that and go, what does it touch? And if you get through that and you're like, okay, public, public, internal, public, public, restricted, private, I want to look at the private thing, and then the restricted thing, and then the internal thing, and I probably don't care about the rest.